I stared at the bank statement in disbelief, my hands shaking. This couldn't be right. I blinked, hoping the numbers would magically change, but they remained stubbornly the same. A $50,000 loan from Richard's parents? When did this happen? "Richard," I called out, my voice echoing through our suburban home. "Can you come here for a second?" I heard his footsteps approaching, and he appeared in the doorway of our home office, an easy smile on his face. "What's up, Lucia?" I held up the statement. "Care to explain this?" His smile faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. "Oh, that? It's nothing to worry about, honey. Just a little financial help from Mom and Dad." A little help? I felt my blood pressure rising. "Richard, $50,000 is not a little help. When were you planning on telling me about this?" He shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. "I didn't think it was a big deal. You know how my parents are, always wanting to help out." I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. That's not the point. We're married. We're supposed to make these decisions together. "Look, Lucia," he said, his tone turning patronizing, "I didn't want to bother you with the details. You've been so busy with work lately, I thought I'd handle it." I stood up, facing him directly. "Handle it? By going behind my back? We agreed to be open about our finances when we got married, remember?" Richard's face hardened. "I made an executive decision. Sometimes that's necessary in a marriage." "Necessary?" I scoffed. "What was so necessary that you needed $50,000 without discussing it with me?" He waved his hand dismissively. "It's complicated business stuff. You wouldn't understand." That stung. "Try me," I challenged. Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Look, can we talk about this later? I have a meeting in 10 minutes. I felt the anger bubbling up inside me. "No, we can't talk about this later. This is important, Richard. We need to discuss this now." He checked his watch, impatience clear on his face. "I don't have time for this right now, Lucia. We'll talk tonight, okay?" Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, stunned and furious. I sank back into my chair, my mind racing. This wasn't like Richard. We'd always been open with each other, especially about money. What was he hiding? My phone buzzed, startling me. It was a text from my best friend Meredith. "Lunch today? I need girl talk." I smiled despite my anger. Meredith always had perfect timing. "Absolutely," I texted back. "You won't believe what I just found out." As I gathered my things to leave, I noticed a piece of mail on Richard's desk. It was addressed to him, but the return address caught my eye. Stella Jewelers. My stomach twisted. Our anniversary wasn't for months, and my birthday had just passed. I picked up the envelope, weighing it in my hand. It felt like it contained a small box. Should I open it? No, I decided, putting it back down. I wasn't going to stoop to his level of secrecy. But as I walked out the door, the image of that envelope burned in my mind. First the loan, now this mysterious package. What else was Richard hiding? I climbed into my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. As I pulled out of the driveway, I made a silent vow to myself. I was going to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. Richard might think he could keep secrets from me, but he was about to learn just how determined I could be. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would turn my entire world upside down. I couldn't shake the unease that had settled over me since discovering Richard's secret loan. As I sat at my desk, trying to focus on work, my mind kept drifting back to our argument. Something wasn't adding up. The ping of an incoming email jolted me from my thoughts. It was from Richard. "Hey, honey, can you transfer $300 to my account for this month's expenses? Thanks." I blinked at the screen, confused. Only $300? That was barely enough to cover groceries, let alone our other bills. Richard's six-figure salary had always covered most of our expenses. What was going on? I picked up my phone and dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. Typical. "Richard, it's me. We need to talk about this $300. Call me back, please." Hours ticked by with no response. By dinner time, I was fuming. The front door opened, and Richard strolled in, whistling. "Hey, Lucia," he said, dropping his briefcase. "What's for dinner?" I crossed my arms. "We need to talk." His smile faltered. "About what?" "About the $300 you asked for. Richard, that's not nearly enough for our monthly expenses." "What's going on?" He shrugged, heading for the fridge. "I thought we could tighten our belts a bit, save some money." "Save money," I echoed. Since when have you been concerned about saving, and why now, right after taking out a huge loan from your parents?" Richard's back stiffened. He turned to face me, his expression guarded. "Look, Lucia, I told you not to worry about that loan. I've got everything under control." "Do you?" I challenged. "Because from where I'm standing, nothing about this seems under control. First the loan, now this. What aren't you telling me?" He slammed the fridge door shut. "For God's sake, Lucia, can't you just trust me? I'm handling our finances. That's my job." "Your job?" I felt my temper rising. "I thought we were partners in this marriage. When did it become your job to make unilateral decisions about our money?" Richard ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident on his face. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just money." Just money. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Richard, money is what keeps a roof over our heads and food on our table. It's not just anything." He waved a dismissive hand. "You're being hysterical. I've got everything under control. Now can we please just have dinner and forget about this?" I stood there, stunned by his cavalier attitude. This wasn't the Richard I knew. The man I married would never dismiss my concerns like this. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "Dinner's in the oven. I've lost my appetite." I turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Richard to serve himself. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I heard him muttering under his breath. Once in our room, I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Something was seriously wrong. Richard's behavior, the secret loan, the measly $300 for expenses. None of it made sense. I pulled out my phone and texted Meredith. "Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? I need your advice." Her response was immediate. "Of course, everything okay?" I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. Was everything okay? I didn't think so, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what was wrong. "I don't know," I finally replied. "I'll explain tomorrow." As I set my phone down, I heard Richard's footsteps on the stairs. I quickly wiped away the tears I hadn't realized were falling and steeled myself for another confrontation. But when he entered the room, he didn't say a word. He just grabbed his pajamas and headed for the bathroom, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a growing sense of dread. Whatever was going on with Richard, I was determined to find out. And I had a feeling I wasn't going to like what I discovered. I couldn't sleep that night, tossing and turning as my mind raced with questions about Richard's behavior. By morning, I was exhausted but determined to get answers. While Richard was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I checked his phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through his messages and emails. What I found made my blood run cold. Credit card bills, expensive restaurant receipts, hotel charges, all hidden from our joint account. I heard the shower turn off and quickly put the phone back. When Richard emerged, I was sitting on the bed, my face pale. "Lucia, you okay?" he asked, toweling his hair. I looked up at him, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Richard, we need to talk about our finances, now." He sighed, dropping the towel. "Not this again. I told you, I've got it under control." "Really?" I stood up, my anger rising. "Then explain the credit card bills I found. The restaurants, the hotels. Where's all that money coming from, Richard?" His face darkened. "You went through my phone? What happened to trust?" "Trust?" I laughed bitterly. "You lost that right when you started hiding things from me. Now answer the question." Richard's jaw clenched. "It's work-related, client meetings, business trips. You wouldn't understand." "Try me," I challenged. He turned away, buttoning his shirt. "I don't have time for this. I'm late for work." As he headed for the door, I called after him. "If you walk out now, don't bother coming back tonight." He paused, hand on the doorknob, but didn't turn around. Then, without a word, he left. I sank onto the bed, my head in my hands. How had we come to this? My phone buzzed, a reminder of my coffee date with Meredith. I grabbed my purse and headed out, desperate for a friendly face. Meredith was already at our usual spot, 2 steaming cups waiting. One look at my face and she knew something was wrong. "Spill," she said, pushing a coffee towards me. I told her everything, the loan, the $300, the hidden expenses. Her eyes widened with each revelation. "Lucia," she said gently when I finished, "have you considered that Richard might be seeing someone else?" The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "No," I whispered. He wouldn't. But even as I said it, doubt crept in. The hotels, the expensive dinners, it all suddenly made a horrible kind of sense. What am I going to do? I asked, fighting back tears. Meredith squeezed my hand. First, we're going to get proof. Then we're going to make him pay. We spent the next few hours plotting. By the time I got home, I had a plan. I logged into our joint account, my heart sinking as I saw the balance. Most of our savings were gone. I checked our credit card statements next, finding charge after charge for things I'd never seen or known about. As I dug deeper, I uncovered a web of financial deceit that left me breathless. Richard had been living a double life, spending money we didn't have on God knows what or who. The front door opened, and Richard walked in. He looked tired, his tie loosened. "Lucia," he started, "about this morning." I cut him off. "I know everything, Richard. The credit cards, the drained savings. How could you do this to us?" He paled, stammering. "I can explain." "Save it," I snapped. "I want the truth, all of it, now." Richard slumped into a chair, looking defeated. I made some bad investments. I thought I could fix it before you found out. And the hotels, the restaurants?" I pressed. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Business meetings, networking." I knew he was lying, but I couldn't prove it. Not yet. "I want access to all our accounts," I demanded. "No more secrets." Richard nodded, looking relieved that I hadn't pushed further. But as he headed upstairs, I caught a glimpse of his phone screen lighting up with a message. From someone named Stella. My heart raced. Who was Stella? And what else was Richard hiding? I had a feeling I was about to uncover something far worse than financial troubles. And I wasn't sure our marriage could survive it. The name Stella haunted me for days. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was more than just a business contact. Richard's secretive behavior and our dwindling finances painted a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore. I was lost in these thoughts when the doorbell rang. A delivery man stood outside, holding a small package. "Delivery for Richard Thompson," he said cheerfully. I signed for it, my heart racing. The return address read Stella Jewelers, the same name from the message on Richard's phone. With trembling hands, I brought the package inside. I knew I shouldn't open it, but the weight of secrets and lies was crushing me. I had to know. I carefully unwrapped the package, revealing a velvet box. Inside was a stunning diamond necklace, far more extravagant than anything Richard had ever bought me. A small card fell out. "To my dearest Stella, happy anniversary. All my love, Richard." The room spun. I clutched the necklace, its cold diamonds biting into my palm. This was no business gift. This was proof of something far worse. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the necklace. The sound of Richard's key in the lock jolted me back to reality. I quickly shoved everything back into the box and hid it under a couch cushion. Richard walked in, his usual charming smile in place. "Hey, honey, how was your day?" I stood up, my legs shaky. "Richard, we need to talk." His smile faltered. "What's wrong? Who's Stella?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. The color drained from his face. "What?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me," I snapped, pulling out the package. "Explain this." Richard's eyes widened as he saw the jewelry box. He reached for it, but I snatched it away. "Lucia, it's not what you think," he stammered. "Really? Because I think you're having an affair. I think you've been lying to me about everything, the money, the loans, all of it." Richard's demeanor changed. His shoulders straightened and a cold look entered his eyes. "You had no right to open that. It's none of your business." His words hit me like a slap. "None of my business? I'm your wife." He laughed, a harsh sound that made me flinch. "My wife? Is that what you think you are? You're just a convenience, Lucia, someone to keep the house clean and look good at company parties." I staggered back, shocked by his cruelty. How long?" "Long enough," he sneered. "Stella understands me in ways you never could. She doesn't nag about money or snoop through my things." Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "So all of this, our marriage, our life together, it's been a lie?" Richard shrugged, reaching for the necklace. "It is what it is. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have plans tonight." As he turned to leave, something snapped inside me. Years of love, trust, and shared dreams crumbled in an instant. In their place, a fierce anger rose. "You're not going anywhere," I said, my voice low and dangerous. He turned back, eyebrow raised. "Excuse me?" I stood tall, meeting his gaze. "You heard me. You're not leaving this house until we sort this out. All of it, the money, the affair, everything." Richard's face darkened. "You can't tell me what to do." "Watch me," I challenged. I've got proof of your financial misdeeds, Richard. One call to the police and your perfect little world comes crashing down. Fear flashed in his eyes, quickly replaced by anger. You wouldn't dare. I pulled out my phone. Try me. We stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. I knew in that moment that everything had changed. The man I loved was gone, replaced by this stranger who'd betrayed me in every possible way. As I dialed the first digit, I realized there was no going back. Whatever happened next would change our lives forever, and I was ready for it. My finger hovered over the phone, Richard's face a mask of fury and fear. Just as I was about to press the final digit, Meredith's voice echoed in my head. Don't do anything rash, we need proof. I lowered the phone, my heart pounding. You have one chance to explain everything, Richard. One chance to save whatever's left of our marriage. He sneered, but I saw the relief in his eyes. There's nothing to explain. You're overreacting as usual. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Fine, if that's how you want to play it, I'll find the truth myself. I stormed out of the house, leaving Richard standing there dumbfounded. I drove straight to Meredith's place, tears blurring my vision. Meredith opened the door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug. Oh, honey, what happened? Between sobs, I told her everything. The necklace, Stella, Richard's cruel words. Meredith listened, her face growing darker with each revelation. That bastard, she muttered. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to find this Stella, and we're going to get proof of everything. For the next few hours, we played detective. Meredith, it turned out, had a knack for online sleuthing. We scoured social media, piecing together the puzzle of Richard's secret life. Look at this, Meredith said, pointing to her laptop screen. It was a photo of Richard at a restaurant, his arm around a young blonde woman. The caption read, Anniversary dinner with my love, 2 years strong. The date was from last month. 2 years. He'd been cheating on me for 2 years. There's more, Meredith said gently. She pulled up financial records, showing large transfers from our joint account to an unknown recipient. He's been funneling money to her, I whispered, the reality of his betrayal sinking in. Meredith squeezed my hand. Lucia, I hate to say this, but I think it's time to talk to a lawyer. I nodded, numb. You're right. This marriage is over. Just then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Richard. Where are you? Come home. We need to talk. I showed Meredith the message. Her eyes narrowed. Don't go alone. I'm coming with you. When we arrived at the house, Richard was pacing in the living room. He looked up, surprise flashing across his face when he saw Meredith. What's she doing here? He demanded. She's here to support me, I said, my voice steady, while you tear our life apart. Richard's face softened, a look I'd seen him use countless times to charm his way out of trouble. Lucia, baby, I'm sorry. I made a mistake, but I love you. We can work this out. I almost laughed. Work it out? After 2 years of lies? After draining our accounts for your mistress? His eyes widened. How did you? It doesn't matter, I cut him off. What matters is that it's over, Richard. I want a divorce. The charm vanished from his face, replaced by cold anger. You'll regret this, Lucia. You're nothing without me. Meredith stepped forward, fire in her eyes. Watch it, Richard. One more word and I'll show you just how much Lucia doesn't need you. Richard glared at us both, then stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. I sank onto the couch, exhaustion washing over me. What do I do now? Meredith sat beside me, her arm around my shoulders. Now we fight. We get you the best lawyer in town, and we make sure Richard pays for every lie, every betrayal. I nodded, a new determination rising within me. Richard thought I was nothing without him? I'd show him just how wrong he was. As I sat there planning my next move, I realized something. The pain of Richard's betrayal was still there, but alongside it was a growing sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Okay, I said, sitting up straighter. Let's do this. It's time Richard learned that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. Meredith grinned, a fierce light in her eyes. That's my girl. Let's make him rue the day he ever messed with Lucia Thompson. As we began to plan, I knew the road ahead would be tough. But I was ready. Richard had underestimated me for the last time. Now it was my turn to show him and the world exactly what I was made of. The day of reckoning had arrived. Armed with a folder full of evidence and Meredith by my side, I marched into our house, ready for the final confrontation with Richard. He was in his study, lounging in his leather chair, as if he didn't have a care in the world. The sight of him, so nonchalant after everything he'd done, made my blood boil. "Richard," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me, "we need to talk." He looked up, his eyes narrowing when he saw Meredith. "I thought I told you to come alone." "And I thought we had a faithful marriage," I shot back. "Looks like we were both wrong." I slammed the folder on his desk, spreading out bank statements, hotel receipts, and screenshots of his conversations with Stella. "Care to explain this?" I asked, watching the color drain from his face. Richard's eyes darted between the documents, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, his demeanor changed. He leaned back, a smug smile spreading across his face. "So what?" he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You caught me. Congratulations. What are you going to do about it?" His cavalier attitude stunned me. "What am I going to do? I'm divorcing you, Richard, and I'm taking everything." He laughed, a cold, cruel sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Good luck with that, sweetheart. You signed a prenup, remember? You'll get nothing." My heart sank. The prenup. How could I have forgotten? But then Meredith stepped forward, a fierce glint in her eye. "Actually, Richard," she said, pulling out another document, "that prenup becomes null and void in cases of infidelity, and we have more than enough proof of that." Richard's smug expression faltered. "You're bluffing." "Try us," I challenged. "We've got statements from the private investigator, testimony from hotel staff, even a signed affidavit from Stella herself." At the mention of Stella's name, Richard's composure cracked. "You talked to Stella?" "Oh, yes," Meredith chimed in. "She was quite helpful once we explained how you've been siphoning company funds to finance your little affair. Turns out she's not too keen on being an accessory to embezzlement." Richard lunged for the phone, but I was quicker. I snatched it away, my heart pounding. "It's over, Richard," I said. "You've lost everything. The company knows about the embezzlement. Stella's gone. And now I'm leaving too." For a moment, I saw fear in his eyes. Then, like a cornered animal, he lashed out. "You think you can survive without me?" he snarled. "You're nothing, Lucia. Just a trophy wife who got lucky. Without me, you'll be back to being a nobody in no time." His words stung, but I stood my ground. I'd rather be a nobody with dignity than spend another second as your wife. I turned to leave, but Richard grabbed my arm, his grip painfully tight. "You're not going anywhere," he growled. Suddenly, Meredith was there, her phone out. "Let her go, Richard, or I start live streaming. I'm sure your company would love to see how you treat women." Richard released me, his face contorted with rage. "This isn't over," he spat. "Oh, but it is," I said, rubbing my arm. "Goodbye, Richard." As we walked out, I heard the crash of something being thrown against the wall, but I didn't look back. My legs were shaky, and tears threatened to spill, but I held my head high. Outside, I took a deep breath of fresh air. It felt like my first real breath in years. "You did it," Meredith said, squeezing my hand. "You're free." I nodded, a mix of relief and fear washing over me. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was mine to choose. As we drove away, I realized this wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of my new life, and despite the pain and uncertainty, I was ready to embrace it. The keys to my new apartment felt heavy in my hand as I stood at the threshold. This small, one-bedroom space was a far cry from the luxurious house I'd shared with Richard, but it was mine. All mine. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, the weight of my new reality settling on my shoulders. Freedom tasted bittersweet. "Home sweet home," I murmured to myself, setting down the last of my boxes. My phone buzzed. It was an email from my lawyer. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, but Richard was fighting tooth and nail for every penny. I sighed, feeling the familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Just then, another email popped up. This one made my heart race. It was from my boss, requesting an urgent meeting. With trembling fingers, I dialed her number. "Lucia," she said, her voice tense. "We need to talk about your position at the company." My throat went dry. "What about it?" "Richard has been making some claims. He's suggesting that you were complicit in his financial misdeeds." The room spun. "That's a lie," I exclaimed. "I had no idea what he was doing." "I believe you," my boss said, "but the board is concerned. We need to conduct an internal investigation. In the meantime," I knew what was coming before she said it. "You're suspending me." "With pay," she added quickly. "But yes." I'm sorry, Lucia. I ended the call, my mind reeling. Richard had struck again, this time aiming for my career. The one thing I had left. I sank onto my new second-hand couch, fighting back tears. How much more could I lose? My phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello, I said warily. Is this Lucia Thompson? A woman's voice asked. Yes, who's this? This is Stella. I nearly dropped the phone. Stella, Richard's ex-mistress, she finished. Listen, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need to talk to you. It's about Richard. My heart pounded. What about him? He's not done with you, Lucia. He's planning something big, something that could ruin you completely. I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean? Meet me, Stella said urgently. I'll explain everything. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop downtown, my mind racing. What could Richard possibly have planned? Hadn't he taken enough from me already? As I grabbed my purse to leave, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Meredith. Lucia, turn on the news, now. I fumbled for the remote, flicking on the small TV in my new apartment. My jaw dropped as I saw Richard's face filling the screen. Allegations against my soon-to-be ex-wife, Lucia Thompson, he was saying, his voice dripping with false sincerity. It pains me to reveal this, but she was the mastermind behind the embezzlement scheme. I was merely a pawn in her elaborate fraud. I watched in horror as Richard spun a web of lies, painting me as a manipulative criminal who had used him for his money and connections. He even produced doctored documents and emails to support his claims. My phone was ringing off the hook now. My lawyer, my parents, even old college friends. But I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I was watching my life, my reputation, everything I'd worked for, crumble before my eyes. In that moment, standing alone in my small apartment, watching Richard destroy me on national television, I felt more alone and defeated than ever before. But beneath the shock and despair, a spark of determination flickered to life. Richard thought he'd won. He thought he'd broken me for good. But he'd underestimated me once before, and I wasn't about to let him do it again. With shaking hands, I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. I had a meeting with Stella to get to, and this time, I was going to fight back with everything I had. The game wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot. I stood outside the courthouse, my heart pounding. This was it. The final showdown. Months of legal battles, sleepless nights, and relentless determination had led to this moment. As I walked in, I caught sight of Richard. He looked haggard, a far cry from the polished man I'd married. Our eyes met, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I once loved. But then his gaze hardened, and I remembered why we were here. The courtroom was packed. I saw Meredith in the back, giving me a reassuring nod. And there, to my surprise, was Stella, looking nervous but determined. As the judge entered, a hush fell over the room. Richard's lawyer spoke first, weaving a tale of my supposed deceit and manipulation. I gripped the edge of my seat, willing myself to stay calm. Then it was our turn. My lawyer stood, a stack of documents in hand. Your Honor, we have evidence that will prove beyond doubt that Mr. Thompson, not Mrs. Thompson, was the sole perpetrator of these financial crimes. What followed was a meticulous unraveling of Richard's lies. Bank statements, witness testimonies, and, most damning of all, a series of emails between Richard and his co-conspirators, detailing every step of his embezzlement scheme. I watched Richard's face as the truth came to light. His cool facade crumbled, replaced by panic and then defeat. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Stella stood up, her voice shaky but clear. Your Honor, I have something to add. She produced a USB drive. This contains recordings of Mr. Thompson admitting to his crimes and planning to frame Mrs. Thompson. He thought I was asleep when he made these calls. Richard's face went ashen. Stella, how could you? He hissed. She met his gaze steadily. Because it's the right thing to do. As the judge reviewed the new evidence, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The truth was finally out. The verdict came swiftly. Richard was found guilty on all counts. As the judge detailed his sentence, jail time, and hefty fines, I saw Richard's parents in the gallery, their faces a mix of shock and disappointment. Outside the courthouse, Richard's father approached me. Lucia, he said, his voice heavy with regret, we had no idea. We want to make this right. They offered to pay the settlement we'd agreed upon in the divorce to help undo some of the damage their son had caused. It wouldn't erase the pain, but it was a start. As I watched Richard being led away in handcuffs, a complex mix of emotions washed over me. Relief, sadness, and finally, a sense of freedom. Meredith hugged me tightly. "It's over, Lucia. You did it." I nodded, tears in my eyes. "We did it." In the weeks that followed, life began to take on a new shape. My name was cleared, and I was reinstated at work with a promotion. The settlement from Richard's parents allowed me to start fresh, on my own terms. One sunny afternoon, as I was setting up my new home office, I found an old photo of Richard and me. We were smiling, blissfully unaware of what lay ahead. For a moment, I mourned for that innocent couple. But then I looked around at my new life, built with my own strength, surrounded by true friends and full of possibilities. I realized that while the journey had been painful, it had led me to a place of authenticity and self-discovery I might never have found otherwise. I picked up the photo and, after a moment's hesitation, placed it in a drawer. It was part of my past, but it no longer defined my future. As I closed the drawer, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my new mentor at work, offering to grab coffee and discuss my ideas for our upcoming project. I smiled, feeling a surge of excitement. This was my life now, full of challenges, yes, but also full of opportunity and genuine connections. "Time for a new chapter," I said to myself, grabbing my keys. As I stepped out into the sunshine, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it might lead. Richard had tried to break me, but in the end he'd only made me stronger, and that strength would carry me forward into whatever adventures lay ahead.